I'm Jess Chapman, and this is Wired to Work, a podcast about how we make work better for everyone. Today, we are having a conversation that is very near and dear to my heart, which is all about learning at work. So the world around us is moving very quickly. Things are changing day to day, and the talent market in particular is pretty tough. Learning and how we grow and develop ourselves is a core skill, whether you're looking for work, trying to grow in your existing role, or whether you're a leader or business owner trying to make sure you're ready for the future. So today we're going to talk about what is it that makes learning work, what are the things that we can do as people and leaders to encourage great learning in our organizations. And to help me have that conversation, I'm being joined by the amazing Meghan Morrison. Meghan is a senior HR person in the government of New Brunswick. So she has lived all of the aspects of trying to make learning work, and she has a passion for the topic and the conversation. So I'm looking forward to seeing what she has to say. Let's get started. What struck me when we were chatting, which I think is worth at least starting the conversation today, was how much learning needs to form part of how we do things today. And yet we're still treating learning as this on top of activity, right? So everyone comes to work, they're supposed to massively perform, everything's supposed to be good, we're supposed to be competent and everything. But it's like, and then maybe if you're lucky, you get half a day to go off and do some kind of workshop, which is also not how people's brains work in terms of learning whatsoever. And then you're supposed to come back and magically apply all of that and make everything better when nobody asks you anything about what you've learned or what you were doing while you were gone. So, you are in the work you do, you are in the thick of seeing everything applied at work. So really, I wanted to pick your brains on if we were going to make learning actually work.
What would that look like?
Had a magic wand, what would you do? So I guess my first question would be, what are some of the challenges you see? You're trying to run an HR department in a very complex organization. Where does learning fit, and what are some of the things that you see that make you go, wait, what?
Well, I think it's so variable. So even within our department has 2,800 people in it. And within that, it almost depends on what type of experience your leader has had before. I almost think there are some people that are like, oh, well, we do learning for technical pieces, right? So if you're in a really technical job, then it's like, of course, you've got to do your learning, get your certifications, that kind of thing. And then it's almost as though, so if your work is about managing others or doing any other type of work that maybe doesn't have designations and stuff associated with it, it's like, and then maybe you can do like a lunch and learn from time to time.
Yeah. Or the expectation that I sometimes think we have, which is I'm a person, so I'm going to be really good with people. Like that.
What's my favorite?
Yes, I have all the skills to do anything to do with people because, I am a person. When in fact, I think it's the most complex set of skills that we have. And with AI coming in, I fully anticipate that the skills around complex people things are going to be the differentiator, right? Like AI does not talk to brains. It's not a person. Despite the fact I sadly saw that half the world is now making AI best friends and like there's apps for you could have AI lovers, which I think is like very
a little troubling, right?
Yes, like we need human connection and we're replacing it with robots, but okay. But it's going to be the people with the skills around people that work, but we don't train. I'm forever doing leadership programs and saying this is the stuff that really matters. We don't train anybody in any of this stuff, and we still don't, right? We still expect people to go into jobs and think they're magically going to be able to do it. So how have you ever seen it work? Have you ever been somewhere you're like, these people have the nut cracked?
I think that I've seen lots of tiny pockets. Like that's almost how things happen, right, Jess? It's almost like there's a little bright spot, or you notice that there's a team where it feels different, or where folks seem to be kind of like incrementally getting better and trying things, or you notice you're like, wait, what do you mean you get together on Fridays and talk about, a book or something that you went and watched together? So I think that a lot of times it's really low. The things I've seen work are really low cost, which I love. And they're very intentional. It's almost like, just doing it a little bit at a time. And I always think about this idea that folks are like, okay, we're going to send you to a course. And like, I love to compare, old binder collections with folks. It's like, these are the binders that I got at the courses that I went to, right? And you can tell that they're like, you blow the dust off them. The amount of money and time and effort that we invest in, it's all done with like such a good, it's a great idea. We're going to do it. We're investing in you. I've seen people make more of a difference by, watching a video together and then talking about how are we going to make this work in our environment? Or like, that type of thing. I think there's so many things that we could do to just encourage people to take a little ownership, a little interest in what they're doing, and then ask them, say, okay, here's the outcome I want. How could we do that? And sort of trust the individual. Like you can get creative about it if you're like, I really don't want to read. Okay, well, what could that look like? What could that look like instead? And if someone wants to teach it to you, you know what I mean? Like I just think about that. Yeah, just in environments where people are willing to be creative and kind of not always get it right.
Yes. And that, I think, I mean, there's probably like 6 things I was listening to that. I was like, oh, that and that. So the first is that the application piece. Like, obviously, we deliver training, like E3 and NeuroWorks delivers training programs. But what I always say to people is training will give you knowledge but it doesn't help you apply any of that knowledge. So now you know things that you didn't know before, and you've maybe, if it's a good training program, like we always have practice activities and simulations and stuff, but that is not the same as doing it back at work. And the brain needs you to do it in the moment and get the immediate feedback for your brain to go, oh, that was good, I should do that again. And so if we don't pair training programs up with any follow-up, then realistically, we're expecting 70 to 80% of the learning to walk out the door. That's assuming the person even wanted to go on training in the first place, which is also not a given. So like whenever I'm talking to folks, I'm often saying, well, you go to the training and then you come back. Does anyone ever ask you about what you learned or how you apply it? So good places I've seen have done, at least get people to do mini lunch and learns to present to other people what they've learned, right? That's a really good way. If you can explain something to somebody else, 1, it forces your brain to make the learning pathways, but 2, you're passing your knowledge on to other people. So I love that concept of it. And the other piece you said is it's literally about how do we apply this here? So there's an immediate rubber hits the road impact of what am I doing with this, and forcing people to have the conversation about it. Well, forcing is probably not the right word, but encouraging the conversation.
Encouraging. Well, creating the space.
You must talk about this learning. But that process. So when we do training programs, I'll often stop and say, I want you to talk to the person next to you about what you've picked up this morning, because the process of having to explain to somebody else makes your brain make the connections you need to retain the learning, right? But we don't often bake any of those things in. Instead, we go, I'm going to send you on a 2-day training program, cram your brain full of learning, hope that you're going to retain some of it. And when you come back, you're miraculously going to apply all of that. It's going to be brilliant.
And here's all the work you missed while you were gone.
Oh, yes, and catch up on
You're
that.
welcome for sending you and go from there. And that's a little pessimistic. I don't honestly, like, the organization I'm with right now is not like that. I've seen lots of organizations that are just trying to do the right thing, but knowing that it's like actually building the time in. And I think so often it's like an invitation to someone to do it. I feel pretty strongly about this idea that we have to create this space for it and sort of hold someone else in their learning, but also that person has to step in. So, right, like you talked about, or if they even want to be there, if we're forcing, you can't force someone to learn, because they legitimately have to say, okay, if this is a new piece of information that I'm like sticking in my library, where do I put it relative to other stuff? Or is it going to push something else out? If someone's not actually doing that reflection, the chances of it sticking or being meaningful afterwards are basically none.
Yes.
And then your whole investment goes out the window. But I don't know that we learn how to do that. It's a different type of learning than we did in school.
Yes. Well, it's certainly not sitting down with a textbook and like, what am I doing today? And I do think it's an important point, right? Because I don't believe that there are any organizations out there that don't want people to learn. I don't
100%.
believe I would talk to a single CEO in the world who'd be like, yeah, I want my people to stay stagnant. That would be fantastic. But that's not happening. And yet we may well be creating the conditions in which they are, because we are not creating the space for learning, or we're assuming it happens miraculously on its own, or because we're assuming that learning is sufficient to say, I'm sending you on training, great, I've invested in you, not the application of the knowledge that you've gained in your training. And I do think your point around what am I going to do there is really good. So quite often when I ask people who run training programs, I'll show up and I'll be like, okay, everybody, so why are you here? And everyone looks at me, right? And I'm like, put your hand up if it's because you were voluntold to attend this training. And I would say all but one maybe, but if not everybody is like, I've never even looked at the agenda. In some cases I haven't done the pre-work. I certainly haven't done the pre-reading. But if we don't have that, you're kind of crossing your fingers that you've made an investment and hoping that that investment works.
For sure. And what you said that I think is interesting, like you've created a space for learning within that. And we know, like, often we talk about like hearts and minds, right? Those are not things that change quickly. And so even having a modular approach to learning, I think sometimes we are more inclined to, if you can put someone and immerse them in learning for a period of time, that gives them a real different experience. Amazing. Would love to do that. So often we're like online and stuff like that. But if you set it up with a provider that's doing stuff intentionally so that it's like, yeah, I know that people are going to come the first day. They're going to be like glazed eyes. Why am I here? What is this about? But knowing that and then building it in. So by the second session, you're ready. I think even things like that, or, if we're sending someone to learn something, recognizing that that approach may take time. It's just like if you really wanted to stick, if that's what we want, which everyone does, of course, it's may not look how you think it's going to look. I think that's a piece. Sometimes people can get in their own way with it, or like, you know, I don't know. I find people, do you ever have folks that are kind of like, I have no learning opportunities, and they've just told you about how they sit there with like their colleague and they just figured out a new system, or I have a coffee with, an old leader that retired a couple years ago once a month, and we just talk about what's going on. I'm like, you're doing mentorship, you're peer learning, you're giving
Yes.
feedback. Like, do you ever find that kind of stuff? Because that always blows my mind when people are like, I never get a chance to learn.
I think back to the traditional expectations, right? So
Hmm.
we don't do a good job of helping think about. Well, firstly, I don't think we do a good job with helping people know what good looks like. So they're not in a position to even know where their opportunities are. And right now, the world is running full tilt. So I don't know that there's many people with the brain capacity to sit back and be like, I'm going to watch other people and decide what good looks like for myself, and then set the bar for myself, and then determine my own development needs, and then go ask the business case and try and persuade the organization to spend money on me. Like, most people are going to be like, too hard. So those pieces I think get in the way. But yes, and I also see it with feedback. So I see people saying, I've never had any feedback. What they mean is no one sat down with me and had a formally badged performance review where I filled in a form and someone told me how I was doing. But actually my boss has been saying, yay, well done. No, that's not great. Actually, can you tweak this for the last 4 weeks in a row? That's feedback, but we haven't badged it for people, and they're used to this traditional lens on things that means they think it kind of gets in the way. And so that's interesting in terms of helping people think about how they implement learning, because a lot of our client base might have HR,
Hmm.
but probably, if not definitely, doesn't have a learning team, right? And then there's an expectation, firstly, that HR also knows how to do learning, which are not the same thing, and definitely not any reason an HR person would know anything about learning, or a learning person would know anything about
Hmm.
HR. Just in case you didn't know that, folks, they're not the same thing. Passion point. So, I think I hear we're saying, one, yes, you've got to make space for learning, but two, you've got to explain what learning even looks like to people so they understand the learning opportunities that are available to them. And it doesn't have to come in the form of a classroom, and it doesn't have to come in the form of, I've gone off to do a thing. It can come very easily through the conversations you're having with people around you, but we don't necessarily do that.
It's almost like, what do we need folks to have thought about or even like conceived beforehand? So I love when there's like, you talked about pre-work. Sometimes it's even just like, okay, we all know that like when you send like a whole bunch of pre-work, the chances of it getting completely done are basically nothing. So what's a level of conversation or something like, I've seen things before where I've had folks be like, have a conversation, talk to 3 people that you respect about their most impactful learning experience, right? If I'm going into something about designing learning, those 3 conversations and sort of like that is enough to turn your mind to this idea of the topic that you're going into. I think that just those types of creative approaches and opening stuff up is really key. Um, and even this idea of what we're trying to learn, because you talked at the start about like there's such a vast difference between a technical skill and something like and like an attitude. And sometimes we'll treat them the same way. It's like, oh, this person needs to learn to be more empathetic, right? So the realistic expectation, like I'm not saying you can't help someone learn that or get more open to it. The challenge we have is that the length of time and the difference between where they are now and maybe where they're going to go is going to be so different. I think it's just, I almost think we should call learning a million different things based on these different stuff. It's like a technical learning, or it's a, a learning about myself, or it's a learning about how to, you know, tweak different behaviors or my tendencies. Like there's so many different types in there.
I've always thought that ties back to buy-in. So I think part of it is, well, actually awareness. So in E3 NeuroWorks world, we have a model called the ABCs, which is if you want someone to perform for you, they need 4 things. Awareness. I need to know what it is you want me to do, why that's important in the grand scheme of everything else I have to do, what good looks like, all of that knowledge. Then I got to want to do it, because just because I know I should do it doesn't mean I want to do it. Then I need to have the skills and tools and ability to do it. And then I've got to be able to sustain that over a long period of time. And I often find we jump to C, right? So when you think about training, it's okay, I've identified that you need to be better at something technical, behavioral, doesn't matter. So I'm going to send you on a training program. But I haven't done A and B first. So I haven't sat down with you and said, let's talk about what it looks like. Let's talk about what I'm seeing. Let's give you the feedback on how I see you do this right now, where your strengths are, where your gaps are, what good looks like, so you're aware, and then why this is such an important thing for you to get better at.
I think even a step further is like asking the learner, what do you think will be different? Like what will be different for you when you learn this? And sometimes that shows something that's maybe an unrealistic expectation, which isn't a bad thing to have. But at the same time, it's really understanding what is it about this skill or knowledge or whatever that's really important to you. And I think that if you can connect to what motivates that person within it, the chances of you getting them to a point of like, capability, mastery of that are so much more. And it's a different type of conversation that I think we're having. But to your point, I don't think it's something AI is going to start doing anytime soon. Really helping people understand that piece of it. And oftentimes when I've seen learning be really meaningful, it goes beyond the work environment, right? So someone who becomes really masterful at great, though difficult conversations is not going to like close that skill off when they leave work.
No.
Right. So like they walk out the door with that too. And I think sometimes it's helping people understand, I can see how this would be important in your work life, and here's how I see it. What do you think would change here? What are those relationships that you think this might help? And then helping them make the thing in, this is learning you get to carry with you. We talk about like throwing your backpack and you can take it forever. But, I think that some of that, what's in it for folks bit is like learning how to navigate the world differently. And if we're really thinking about our teams and our individuals as we're trying to help them, have a better life.
But
Yeah.
that's an interesting point too, because we're talking then about what's the motivation for the person signing off on the training, right? So are you interested in people having a better life? Right? Like, are you interested? Are you looking ahead in your organization or your team and thinking about, if this is where we want to go, what are the skills and abilities we need to have and how do we get there? And identifying that piece, because quite often I find that learning is looked at as a cost. And maybe if you're lucky, an investment, but the idea that you should be happy about that investment because we're investing in you. Actually, it's an investment in your organization too. Now, it's hard. I totally get, I'm a small business owner. I only have, there's like 8, 9 people in my team. So figuring out who's disappearing off to learn what and so on, that's not necessarily straightforward. But your examples of, can I pair people up together? Absolutely. Do people shadow me to learn? Absolutely. Do we have short courses that take 30 minutes for people to do? Yes. Like then there's the more traditional stuff that people do on the side. But I don't know that we necessarily spend enough time thinking about the implications if we don't train our team, and the rationale and the reason for investing in people beyond, I want to be a good employer, or I'm genuinely interested in people having better skills and a better life. Like government world, from my perspective, is often one of those places where budgets are tight, spending is a question mark. How do you, what are some of the things that you have seen in your world that have influenced people to invest in learning?
Massive wisdom, obviously. But I think sometimes government is cyclical, right? You see those patterns. And I think that if you are someone or a leader who has been around at a time when development felt like the easiest first cut, those are often the people who are so protective of it the next time it comes around and they're in a decision-making position. Because they have seen how like we talked about those skills that just take time. It just takes time. It just takes practice. You got to actually mess up at this to probably retain it. Those types of things, I think it's a lot of trust from a leader and a group of leaders to say, no, this is really important to us. And there's so many opportunities to learn that. I also think that there's a piece of leaders want team members who are accountable and who are like really, I want them to like run with it. I want them to do all this stuff. I think that does not come out of nowhere, right? So this idea, like until you feel like you're competent, you're not going to start making bold decisions, especially if you're in a time of very tight fiscal restraint. So I think it's just like making that space for it to be okay, and just knowing, okay, these are the people that are going to lead here. I'm not going to be here the next time this cycle comes around. These are the folks. These are the ones that need to learn these lessons. So it's I've seen it many times. I've seen wonderful leaders come out of times when you're like, this is taking a lot of guts to do this. What's this about? And they're like, oh, we gutted this program when I was in this and I really could have used it.
I felt the personal impact of it.
I felt the personal impact, or even just someone who's like, I needed someone to bet on me. We did it was based on interviews, but we did sort of a small scale policy innovation challenge a couple of years ago. And part of it was around asking some of our most senior leaders, what was the key to you getting here? How did you get here? And almost every single one had a champion, had someone who opened the doors or made the space for them or brought them into rooms that they maybe had no business being in at the time. And that's like the kind of learning I think that we were talking about at the start. It's absolutely, you need that conventional learning that you learn from courses or online or whatever, reading, all those things. There's something about seeing the environment and then having a trusted person to say, what just happened?
Yes.
Especially I think I'm 20 years in government, and there are nuances. You're dealing with legislation and all this stuff, but there's the rules, and then there's how do we navigate a system that is run by people with all of this stuff, knowing that every single dollar we spend, we talk about the Tim Hortons test. Could I sit at Tim Hortons and have the crew of people who go there every single morning hear me say that I spent this money and keep drinking their coffee, or are they going to spit it out and tell me something, right? This idea, like that responsibility is really with it. So I think that for leaders in government in particular, and anywhere, to say this is worth this investment, you've really got to be like, okay, I know that it's going to make a difference. I know this is going to take time. And most of those leaders have had someone open that door for them. Or for a group of them.
The opening the door and letting the person into the room piece, I think we underestimate how valuable that is from a brain perspective. Because when you think about learning, really the things that allow somebody to deliver are practice and visualization. And effectively, visualization is just mental rehearsing. You're just not actually practicing, right? You're doing it in your head. And so when we're actually in the room and watching other people, that is a form of practice. It's a form of rehearsal. We can see what good looks like. There is someone demonstrating for us. That's why demonstrations are so helpful. We can see how it's supposed to work. And so that concept of like, we would have talked in our world 70-20-10, right? On the
exactly.
dot. For those who don't know, 70-20-10 is a way of thinking about learning. 70% of your learning should come on the job. 20% comes from relationship-based learning, like mentoring and coaching, and 10% comes from those traditional things that we're talking about, like classroom training. And most organizations that don't have learning people in them think the flip. Right? Like my learning is I've got to send people to a training course, give them a book, make them watch a video, something of that nature. Not saying don't do that. Like that can be super helpful. But actually our brains don't. That's not how connections get made for people so much as the visualization and the practice and the application of it. So when you open a door and you take someone to an executive meeting, or you take them along to a client meeting that they haven't seen, or you ask them to have a go at writing the proposal and then you sit down and compare side by side, those are often more meaningful, impactful learning experiences because I actually have to see it and then my brain, oh, okay, I get it now. Whereas in training, you're just talking to me about the theory of it. If you're lucky, you're doing practice and demonstration as well, but it's still not the same as real life kind of application. So I just wanted to put that out there because I don't know that everybody everybody who doesn't have a learning background would think about learning in that way. Like that's actually better learning than sometimes going to a training program would be.
And even building in that little bit of the debrief afterwards. So I have ADHD. My neurodivergence is part of my superpowers, but it means that like in environments like that, I will notice a lot of different things, and getting the chance afterwards to come back and say, hey, what was it about this? Or I noticed that you almost acted, but then you didn't. We talked before you were going to go and talk about this, but you didn't do it, right? So getting someone to say, when I walked in and I noticed that the room was already 15 minutes behind, it seemed like everyone was going. We're right before lunch. I was like, what's my one important thing? That's what I asked. I think that those types of things are very, very special learning opportunities and have to be paired with all the other stuff.
Yes. I love that. And back to if you're a leader with people going on training, like it doesn't take much, right? So before they go, like, what do you want to get out of this training program? Like, talk to me about what is value? What do you see value as being for you? What would good look like for you at the end of all of this? We've taken something away. That's 3 questions. It's a 10-minute conversation. Could totally preempt and change the way that person shows up on the training. And then afterwards, what did you learn from that? What did you take away? How do you feel about this? And whether it's program or experience, either of those works. But the question about like, what did you notice? I think is a great question. And I've had times when I've said to my team in particular, so what did you think about that? And they've kind of gone, right? No, like what did you take away? I could sit here and download to you all I like, but your brain and my brain are not the same. So what did you take away from that meeting? What connections are you making? Then I can fill in the gaps and anything, but I need to reinforce their connections first. So if you're a leader and you ask a couple of questions before someone does something and a couple of questions after, those 4 questions could totally cement the learning in somebody's brain in a way that you wouldn't have done otherwise. I think that's important. Yeah.
Big time. And even like trigger action. So the question classic that I learned from a leader of mine was what went well, what was tricky, and what would you do differently?
Yes.
And the piece that you said, Jess, so would often be, I think, about doing after this conversation, I could be like, hey, Jess, so what went well about that? Right? It's your podcast. You get to go first. You tell me, right? You do that. And I may not have to add anything. Right. So that idea.
With all of that sounds great. Off you go. What do you need for me to do that?
Sounds good. Yeah. Was there anything tricky about it? Cool. Actually, and if you're working with people who are like wildly hard on themselves, which I think a lot of us are, this didn't go. Actually, I thought that was pretty normal. That's going to happen when you're in those environments.
Yeah.
I've been doing this for 20 years. That's absolutely normal. Nobody thought anything of it, or that was a stumble, but you handled it really well. So just this idea of like, we think about feedback or recognition and all these things feel like these big, huge things. It's like, could you have a couple questions in your pocket, like you said beforehand? What are we going into? What are we looking for? Could you have a couple questions afterwards? And then the amount of learning that comes from that, it triggers action. Okay, great. Those are all awesome. Would we do anything differently? We've got another one of these in 2 weeks. What do you think? That type of thing, I think, is when we, I think as leaders, we can sometimes be like, okay, I have to, and then I'll set aside some time and I'll get ready to be ready. Like it's the same kind of, like, I got to go work out so I can be ready to go to the gym. It's like, just do it.
By doing it the way you're describing, you're also creating space for, one, you're saying, having development opportunities is normal. I'm asking you to self-reflect on what didn't go well. That means I'm expecting something didn't go well, which means it's okay that something didn't go well. And half the time, I think learning gets stunted in organizations because it's not okay to make a mistake and it's not okay to get it wrong. So when you're saying, well, so what would we do differently? What was better about that? And if you as a leader are also saying those things, so I used to do this with my team when I had a much bigger department. I'd be like, well, I thought that went pretty well, but I thought that was not so great. And I'm thinking I'll do this differently next time. Then you're also demonstrating the vulnerability that not being perfect and getting it wrong or not having everything go to plan is okay and normal as long as we learn from it. And that's most of the time. I say to my team all the time, we don't do brain surgery. We're very lucky. Like you could totally screw up utterly. No one is going to die. I might have to fix a few things. We might have to like give a discount to a client if you do something. But at the end of the day, like things aren't going to go perfectly, but let's learn from them and make sure we learn from them. So you tell me, what did you like about that? What would you do differently if you were going to do it again? Those are fabulous questions.
And just this idea of like, that someone, like when you mess up, like And it's like, please give me, like, there's nothing like sitting there and being like, okay, I messed up so terribly and I can't wait for the person to tell me how badly I did. But instead just being like, how do you think it went? It was a train wreck. It was not how we wanted, right? That idea of getting someone to say it themselves and I think the accountability and ownership that goes with that, like those behaviors of, I want people to say when they mess up, I want someone to come with me the second they know something's wrong. Modeling that with like super low risk environments, it's way more likely that when someone's like, I accidentally clicked on that email and now my entire computer's like whizzing, right?
Don't hide it.
Yeah, don't hide it. But if I sit down with with my team, and I've been there for about 6 weeks right now, and they at first were kind of like, are you serious? And I was like, yeah, are we okay to do it right now? We can do it another time. Or would you join me? I just ran that meeting. Would you join me while I do some debrief of it? And they're like, okay. I'm like, what went well? Okay, I'm going to go first. My meeting, I'm going to go first. And just modeling that. And I think they thought I was an alien at first, which is exactly where you want them at the start. But that modeling of learning, like all of those types of learning and that simple learning on the fly. And like we think about how all of these IT teams are working in agile or things like that, where we're like, what's the modification? Let's go in. Okay. So no more changes right now. No more 10 minutes before the meeting, not making any changes. But immediately afterwards, I can be like, ooh, what would I do differently? The pattern of doing that versus waiting until I'm getting ready the next time, that's like your whole opportunity for learning is in that last little time when it still feels fresh. Also recognizing that depending on how someone's wired, they may need a lot more reflection time or internalizing processing time. So sometimes it's with some team members, maybe you're just like, okay, well, let's talk about it later. You had a course last week. What's a good amount of time for you? Do you want to do 10 days later? Okay, 10 days later, come on in, and love to chat before our check-in. Let's do an extra 15 minutes. You can tell me what, this is what you're hoping to get. We can talk about that. I think that, and I think booking it and planning it ahead of time helps it happen. Same kind of thing. We've got some learning coming up with some of our team members, and we were sort of toying with the idea, do we send one person or whatever? And we were in a position to be able to send 3. And so it was like, oh, do we do that as the learning? And it was like, if this is learning of stuff that we don't currently have a ton of on our team, how do we give folks, allies? When it comes to, okay, if we're going to ask them to implement this, let's not make one person come and try to do something on their own. How do we send 3 people and then say part of this learning? So before we send them, part of this learning is going to be coming back and thinking about what does this look like? And you have each other. So even being intentional about setting up those things, as much as we want folks to think about that on their own, why not just facilitate it and set the expectation? I think there's lots of opportunity there. And all the stuff we're talking about just is like, no money.
Yeah, it's not my money.
And it's just time.
Questions. Hello.
Time, questions.
Now, someone is going to say time is money. And in an organization like mine where we build time, then it is absolutely money. I was going to come back to this, back to creating impact for leaders that are sitting there going, perhaps I haven't had an impactful learning experience, I think, or I've had a very specific learning experience and I'm happy to send you on that one, but I'm not willing to consider learning for you more generally because it's that I think works. How do you encourage learning in that environment? But I do think it's tied to, it does not have to be a formalized, expensive thing. Like what we're talking about is being intentional about asking questions, being clear with people about what their opportunities are, getting them to self-reflect on those opportunities, and then creating spaces that they get to go into that normally they wouldn't, right? None of that costs you a ton of money. It does cost you a bit of time. But there's a piece that I'm seeing at the moment all the time, which I think is worth having some conversation about, which is up until the last year or so, we had a relatively good talent market. Right? Like you could go to market, you could post a job, you could find the person that you wanted, and probably were picking and choosing between 2 or 3 people that all could have been equally good. There are always exceptions. There are always roles that are hard to fill, but generally speaking, that's the case. Now we are not there anymore. And I am seeing through the lens of a lot of the organizations we work with where there has been a dearth of development, because now we're in a situation where people are saying, well, I can't find anybody to do X. And my first question is, well, isn't there anybody internally who could grow into that? And everyone goes, oh, well, maybe, right?
Mm-hmm.
One, not sure, don't know, right? Which is perfectly normal. So I'm never criticizing, but it's about raising awareness of where we are. Is anybody in your team interested even? Do you even know who's interested in that role, let alone how close they are to being competent in it and good at it? And if you haven't been developing the skills, people can't just change their skill set overnight. Like it takes, to your point, you said a number of times, it takes time for people to learn. If you're not thinking now about where you want your team to be in 18 to 24 months time, by the time you need the skills that they will need in 18 to 24 months time, it's too late.
That's right. And getting people used to this idea that learning is part of it. Like I think it's the expectation is also there. Well, like in every if you look at any kind of formal feedback, it's our performance review. We'll go into it. The like most ignored section on the entire form is, and what's your learning and development plan for next year, right? So this idea that not being a checkbox, but really being like, what do you really see yourself doing? Okay, that's extremely technical. Right. And even having those conversations, okay, well, that's something you're going to have to grow into. And maybe it's not applicable to the work we're doing, so that's not something I can support you in as far as like this, but here's what's related. Would you be interested in learning any of that? That's something that I know our organization's really interested in. Right. So just having that foresight, or even, getting folks used to this idea that everyone on our team is working on something. Right. And I think that's a piece. One thing we are doing this week with one of the managers that I work with is putting together what has everyone's most recent development been. What opportunities have we been giving to folks? And some of those are just like representing the team at a meeting, right? But just this kind of thing, and getting used to this idea of how do we show everyone, if people are comfortable doing it, here's some of the different things people have been learning. So if you're really interested in learning about this, here's someone on your team you work with every day. We could ask each other about those types of things. Or even just as a leadership team saying, are we going to the same folks over and over? Are we going to the people who are like the most keen and this kind of thing? It's like, okay, well, what does that person care about? We don't know. We got to start making sure in their regular check-ins, we're like, what parts of your job do you really love? Or is there anything you like? My father always told me that he got jobs by pointing and being like, what does that person do? Right. So this idea, do you look around and think, I'm really interested in that? That's actually how I first started learning about HR. As someone said, well, who do you see around here that's working that you're interested in? I was like, I have no idea what Shelley does, but I really think I like to do what she's doing. They're like, oh, she's people resources. What's that? Right. I had no idea, but just being like, oh, well, it seems like she's constantly talking to people. She's the one who comes out and is knows all of the other people and how they interact. And that was something I was interested in. So I think that sometimes encouraging people, what do you see around here that seems interesting? We had a conversation today with our executive team, even saying, in an organization of 2,800 people, when you look at your exit survey data and folks are saying, I went somewhere else because I just thought there were more opportunities. It's like, okay, are we talking to folks in one area of the business about all of the other areas of the business? Right? Like we have some really transferable skills. If someone's great at, I work at Service New Brunswick. Service, everything's a service, right? So if someone is really tuned into that, are there technical skills that they have that could go somewhere else? Are there people skills they have? And it was such a great conversation just having our CEO and our VPs sort of say, I don't know if we're asking people to think about that. Everyone's looking, oh, well, I guess I could be my manager. I could be this. I could be other folks I'm in contact with. There's a whole big wide thing. And in small organizations, sometimes it's like, who are you partnering with outside that you're like, what they're doing is really interesting. Is there something about that we could do here?
I think that's really interesting on a couple of different counts, because sometimes what I hear is, well, there's nowhere for me to go in a small organization. I'm like, there's no defined role, perhaps, but actually, if there's a small organization, the chances are there's loads of stuff you could be doing because there's people to do it. And then if it's a bigger organization, the chances are there's tons of roles you know nothing about and you can do it. But I'm always a bit surprised by the folks who say, I have nothing to learn. I have no development areas. I personally, I was like, I have a ton. I have a ton of different
Yeah.
areas. One, because I'm not perfect as a human being and I'm learning stuff all the time. But two, the world never stops changing. So I personally feel like that. But I always wonder, like, when somebody says, like, I got no development areas, I got nothing to work on in my job. I'm like, what conversations have we been having with that soul? Like, how is it they've got to the point where they really feel like they have nothing to learn? Now,
Like nailing it every day.
you're nailing it in every aspect of everything you do everywhere, and for all the careers, jobs you could do in the future, and how happy you are, and everything in your job is super easy, and you have nothing that you'd like to make easier whatsoever in your life. Okay, if that's true, you need to write a book because you could make millions and go and live on an island somewhere.
It's right. And I do often think, like, is that a fear response? Is it something coming from a place of, a lack of confidence, or,
Lack
there
of
are some
awareness.
people that legitimately are, in my experience, the folks having those comments are often not perceived that way by their colleagues or supervisors, right? But are we letting it go because that's okay? Not everyone has to like strive for something else, and I think that's also recognizing what's important to that individual and helping them learn about the stuff that's important to them. I've seen many times where someone who was, rightly or wrongly maybe labeled as someone who didn't want to grow, didn't want to whatever, who in their last few years have seen some amazing leaders say, what legacy do you want to leave at this organization? Great.
Great question.
What could that look like? And, and so to turn from being, I don't have anything to learn, to recognizing, like, you might have lots to teach. I think change can be really scary. And we think about, like, the way things change in this environment of, like, learning so much new stuff, when folks have sort of been like, I kind of thought this was going to be my job. And we know that once upon a time people would start a job and that's the job they did forever. And now when you say that to someone coming out of school, they are terrified, like, I don't want to do the same job forever.
Yeah,
Right? Please no. So this just recognizing, okay, well, how do we then honor what has been done? Like, I think about that so much. Everything we do is because it worked at the time. You know what I mean? It was nobody was like, let's have this terrible learning. This is going to be the best, right? It's like,
let's
that
leave
role,
everyone to fester in their jobs and be completely disconnected because we don't want to teach them anything. Like, that's never the case, right? Like,
no, it's just like, well, people used to learn differently, or like so much of it was manual. It was different. There wasn't as much opportunity for people to try a bunch of different things. I sometimes think it's like, okay, well, how do we honor what someone who has experienced a different work environment, and recognize that's the foundation we're building our current stuff on, in a way that's respectful, but also saying, the invitation for you to be involved in learning is still here. And maybe that's learning how to transfer information of yours to someone else. Maybe that's learning how to, like, I think about mentorship and, like, the reciprocity of it, that it's not just one direction. It's the amount of people who are like, I've learned so much from my mentee, I can't even tell you, right? So just the gift that we can give folks, as far as, like, learning being different than we might think it is.
Yes, and the thought on that. Let's change tack slightly.
Sure.
There's lots of different ways of learning, which we've been talking about. But I do quite often in my world, and I'm sure you're the same, get pushback for some of them. So what is your view of micro learning, of e-learning, like the technology-based learning end of the spectrum? Like, what's your view?
I think that for some people, it seems to work really well. And I think that if every single person in the same area were built the same, wouldn't that be easy? Probably really boring, but that's just not reality, right? So I love when people are like, oh, you're an HR person. I'm like, yeah, okay, sure. Like, I've got a lot of squishy balls in my office, sure. But there are also HR people who I work with that are built very differently, or like, you must know a fun accountant, right? Like, just this idea that one type of learning is going to be the thing that works for everyone, I think is difficult. I also do think that we only know if that learning works once someone applies it. So there are times when people have microlearning is wonderful if it leads to application. The beauty of that stuff is it could be just in time. This could be just in time learning that's so small that I could take it, I could apply it, and I could start to incorporate it right into my life on a daily basis. That is the beauty of it. If it's to collect a tray of badges, let me just put these badges here, but it's not really meaningful and I'm not incorporating it, I don't think it works. So just like everything in HR, it depends. Right. So I want to think that that stuff has its place, but also recognizing that online learning for me particularly is not a great way for me to learn, but that doesn't mean I haven't seen people do it really well. And I'd hate to see us take just one way of learning stuff and accidentally cut out different types of people from being part of our organization if there's a fit for them in some way. What do you think about it? Are you a microlearning gal?
Probably not, unsurprisingly, not super far away from where you are. I think my challenge with all things is not format, it is attention. So the issue that we have, so when you think about learning, there's a really good model actually from the Neuro Leadership Institute called the AGES model. So it looks at attention, generation, emotion, and spacing, right? Those are the four things that you need. Attention being the first one. And part of the challenge I have with a lot of what is technology-driven learning is that people don't know what good looks like. And so a lot of that content can be what I would say is tell content. So you're sitting watching a video or you're on a webinar, but you're not really listening because someone's talking at you for 60 minutes while you're really doing your email. So in that case, your brain is not giving due attention to the learning content. You're not going to learn anything because you're not giving it the attention. And a lot of those things are kind of one-way mechanisms. So again, if I have the awareness of what I want out of it, if I'm bought into doing it, if that mechanism works for me and I've got the full attention on it, I will probably take something out of it and then work to apply it with somebody to support me. Everything is great. So I actually don't think that it's a format question. I think it's an attention question. And when you say that doesn't work for me, that way of learning and processing information does not work for me. I can't read non-fiction books. I can inhale a fiction book in like 2 hours. Like if I sat down before bed and read a book, I could read a fiction book. But non-fiction, I'd rather poke myself in the eyeball with a fork, right? So I think for me, it's a question of if you know how you learn best, how do you fit that into your workday? But I do see a lot of organizations gravitating to what I would call technology-driven learning because it's easier, right? Like I've got a remote workforce now, or we can do a short course in 20 minutes. Yes, we provide short courses for people. They are absolutely an option, but is it interactive? Does it have reflection questions? Does it make the person think? Are you kind of going through it? Are you asking them to do it on their lunch break when that's the only break they've got from the day and their brain is now maxed out completely because they've got no downtime? Or are you creating the space and the intentional questions around it, which you were talking about earlier? So, but I think it's important because I do, like some of my clients, like we're never doing e-learning. I'm like, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
No, there's absolute value in it. And I think that like helping people navigate that, the amount, like sometimes if you look at a learning management system, the number of options is debilitating for folks, right? So anything when kind of help to be curated or how does this relate to me, right? And really, like I think that what does that user need to understand about it, right? Like if it's really about me, and learning is about, yes, it's about the organization eventually, learning is about an individual, right? So how are we going to help this individual understand how this relates to them? And that's where those questions and stuff come in. And just I've done like a job interview that was a 10-minute timed thing, and I've spent 5 of my minutes asking a question to the panel, right? Like you just, I truly believe that it helps people engage differently. And even if it's 400 people on an online platform and you're asking folks, give me a word for this and type it in the chat.
Quiz questions. I got multiple choice quiz questions. Everyone can hit C on their keyboard. At least I know they're still awake.
How are we showing up today? Put your favorite ridiculous image or you know what I mean? Emoji, anything in there. That idea of like signs of life. Show me you're there. I think that that's important. And My husband is a soccer coach or football coach. You can probably see behind me. Chelsea fan. I still love him. He's great. Um, but this idea of being in a room or being in learning with people and having no idea who else you're with, it's sort of like makes things like e-learning or being in that kind of thing, like it doesn't have context. It's like it's untethered. So how do we help people tether to something? If I'm in a room with folks, my first expectation is there's a chance to tell me who else is here. And if there's 30 people and we give everybody 30 seconds, which won't end up being 30 seconds, I think that is a good way to spend time. If I'm in an online learning situation where it's just me, self-paced, help me understand what this is connected to. Help me reflect on, maybe if this is the first time you've ever done something like this, like, don't worry, it's similar to these other disciplines that you may, whatever. Any opportunity to feel connected is like that buy-in. So for me, attention comes when I feel connection.
Yes.
So how do we help people connect? Knowing that for some people, that is not a problem. Focus is not an issue. They can absolutely come in at any point, or some people are just simply motivated by like learning anything at any point. Those people that are taking it all in, that like all of those books, your friend reading through all those books, but letting people know that all of those ways are absolutely reasonable, wonderful, and together can actually make the magic, right? So him talking you through the big thing and you being like, here's kind of the big milestone post. I want to know more about this one.
Yes. Tell me about this.
Everything made sense to me, but this one I was like, "Brr."
Yeah.
And he's like, no, no, no. If you read the whole book, you would have loved it. Da, 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 right? Like that type of interaction. And it's like, yeah, am I going to keep this in my library? Yes or no? I still learn when I'm like, I actually don't think this is going to bump anything off the shelf. That's me reinforcing an idea that I have. Okay, this system's already working for me, right? Same kind of thing when folks are looking in anything, not doing anything's a choice, right? So what's the choice? Am I moving towards? Am I moving away? Whatever I'm doing, it's the same kind of thing with learning. It's how do we help people decide what works for them and feel like they are part of the learning process rather than being just, you know,
And that you can
sent.
challenge and reject, right? To your point, right? I think sometimes people go on training programs, especially ones with me, and I'll be like, so I'm fully expecting you to poke holes in everything I tell you because I'm teaching leadership skills. There's no right way of leading people. There's no fixed answer. It's only, is this working for what you were trying to do or not? And do you know, right? So I'm like fully expecting people to poke holes in it. And meanwhile, I think people come expecting that they are supposed to take everything out of a learning program. And I'm like, no, learning is about where does this fit with you? And if it doesn't fit right now, it might fit in a year's time, right? Your brain will
Mhm.
connect to things that make sense to you right now and let go of the things that don't. And that's perfectly fine, which is why sometimes we revisit things 3 years later and think, how did I not like this? This is genius. But 3 years ago, I thought it was useless, right? Because we're not in the right headspace for it. And so learning is not a static event, nor is it a moment in time, which I think is sometimes what we forget with people. I'm conscious of time. I want to talk to you forever. I think we could
I
change
want to
the
talk to you forever too, and I'm sure we will again.
but I want to ask you to think about one last question. So we talked about a few things in this space, but if you could suggest one thing to a leader to help them develop their team, what would you suggest?
I would suggest that they ask their team, what is something that, like, if we knew more about or could do differently, would make a difference in our day to day? I think start small. Um, or I think learning starts from the individuals. What's something that we have lots of knowledge? What's something we know a lot about? And what's something that we maybe don't? And start to get them there. Like this idea of like strengths based, how can we acknowledge there are things that your team is going to know a lot about, and maybe some things that you have no idea because it didn't seem relevant, right? You may have someone who has some brilliant knowledge, and then recognizing where are we not super knowledgeable or super experienced, and then start to think about, okay, well, what if that would make a difference? Some of those things, like we're not super good at dolphin training. May or may not be applicable. You're not going to throw in on that one, but it might be like, we don't know a lot about how the other parts of the organization work, or we don't have a lot of skills outside of our very, small technical, the systems that we use. Those are the only systems we really know about. What if these systems go away? Those types of things could really help you direct where you choose to take learning and have your team feel like they're in the driver's seat for it.
What I love about all of that is it normalizes it's okay to not know. It's okay to not have the answer. It's okay to have development. It's okay to talk about things that don't work, because that's all the foundation and basis for growth and learning. Until we get people comfortable with, I don't know, but I can go find out, then it's never going to put learning at the heart of an organization. But an organization that doesn't have learning at the heart is going to have people who get outpaced very quickly by growth and change. So awesome. Thank you so much for coming to join me today. It was awesome. I'm going to have you back for many a conversation. There's one already brewing. We need to have a conversation with Jules about meeting madness.
I know. I was just like, there's so many things we could go off on here, but
we could talk about gamification. We could talk about visual, like all kinds of things, and maybe we will. This is not going away. Yeah. The podcast is here to stay. So
awesome. I look Thank forward you to so much, Jess.
You're very welcome, my love. Have a lovely rest of your day, and look forward to sharing the episode with you when Roz has done her magic with it.
Sounds great. Nice to meet you, Roz.
So that's a wrap for today. Thank you very much for joining in. And if you liked our conversation today, please do like and subscribe. You can find us on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. You can also check out our websites, e3.ca and neuroworks.ca, for more information about what we do in the wonderful world of work. So thanks again for joining in, and I look forward to seeing you on another episode.